Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So we are in the session for Cultivating Resilient Student Leaders Lessons from Nourish to Flourish with host Tori Harris. Welcome, Tori. Welcome, everyone. I will pass it off to yourself to get started. My name is Haley. I'm also the host, and we also have Ruth from Caucus here if there's any questions. But Tori and her team are going to lead us through a beautiful session, a little bit of cafeing, a little bit of conversation. And so I'm very excited to hand it over to you to get started. So thank you, Tori.
Thank you so much. Before we get started, I wanted to say it's a small group today. Most of these folks work with me at UVic, so I want to make sure that we have lots of time for chit chat. So if you want to join us on camera, if that feels comfy for you, I highly encourage so you can join the conversation. We're going to be doing some breakout room activities in like the first 10 minutes of the workshop. So I just want to give you a heads up so you can prepare yourselves. And then feel free to use the chat, say hi, ask any questions, share any insights. I'm a pretty loosey-goosey presenter, so you can ask questions at any time, put anything in the chat, and I'll try to answer them. Okay, you're here at Cultivating Resilient Student Leaders, Lessons from Nourish and Flourish. I'm going to ground us in a territory acknowledgement. So I would like to acknowledge with respect the Songhees and Cosept or Esquimalt peoples on whose territory the University of Victoria stands, and the Lekwungen and the Saanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. So I know that we are meeting across Turtle Island, but it's important to acknowledge the lands that I currently occupy. And I just wanted to add a little bit about working with student leaders over many different roles and many different years. I've had a chance to kind of reflect on my leadership practice and how it's evolved over the last couple of years and how decolonization has been really incorporated into my practice and the impact I've seen of that on students that I work with. So I just want to express my gratitude to the folks in my community who have offered me guidance and learning, who have fingerprints all over the Nourish and Flourish program, and then as well as my office for making space for this important work. So as I mentioned before, I'm Tori. I use she, her pronouns, and I work as the student leadership coordinator at the University of Victoria. And I currently coordinate a student leadership program called Nourish and Flourish, which we are going to be talking about today. And I have been in student affairs and residence life for over 10 years. And my approach to leadership is based in values of trust, respect, and community. So we'll definitely be talking about that today. It's really important for me to create equitable opportunities for students, as well as safer spaces where students can find community. And then personally, I love listening to podcasts and doing bar classes and trying new restaurants and spending time outdoors with my family and friends. So, like I mentioned, we're here to explore what leadership rooted in community care looks like, specifically at UVic, but what it could potentially look like on your campuses. And we're going to be co-creating meaning and insight from our conversations today. So we're going to start off with an activity, and then we are going to look at community-based leadership, the consultation process that I did for Nourish and Flourish, the program structure. We're going to look at World Cafe method, which is the facilitation style we use, and then how we build in safety at our programs. So the first thing that I wanted to kind of talk about is just things that we can keep in mind during the session. So I've written down a few things that I'm going to share. And if there's anything else that anybody wants to add, we can do that at the end. So the first one is to share from your own perspective. So people have probably heard the what's learned here leaves here, what's shared here stays here kind of mantra. We're going to be using that today, as well as just asking everybody to share from their own experiences, not those of others. taking space and making space for people. We all arrive with different identities and lenses. So being mindful of who's in the room and how you can make space for others, but also take space when the opportunity arises or is offered. And then to respect the ranges of experiences in this space, be open to self reflection, respect all levels of knowledge and experience, and just remember that we are in a place of learning together, and some people may be at different places in their journeys. So if a disagreement arises, I'm encouraging folks to listen to one another with openness, which leads me to also intent versus impact. So sometimes we say something that doesn't sit right with others. So we ask that folks use positive intent, but also attend to the impacts when we do cause harm by stopping, naming the behavior, and apologizing. Okay, we're going to get into our first activity. So I'm going to share my whiteboard, and then I'm going to explain the instructions. Okay, I have three questions that we are going to look at. Actually, before we get started, I didn't ask, does anyone want to add anything to how we want to show up in this space together? We're all in agreement. Okay, lovely. Okay, so we're gonna do a little bit of a World Cafe um, method activity, so you can see how World Cafe operates IRL. So we are gonna be taking some time to answer three questions that I have written out. Because we're a small group, we're gonna do them all together, but you can envision in your head that we are in person and we have some flip chart paper in front of us. We're sitting at a nice table. And after each question, we're moving to another table and getting a chance to talk with other people. So I'm going to be your note taker for this evening. We're going to start with the first question. And Lydia and Amelie, highly encourage you to join us on video. Or if you want to weigh in on the chat, I would love to hear what you have to say. So the first question that I want to pose to you folks, and you can just unmute and jump in whenever you'd like. What does traditional leadership mean to you? Who gets left out? And what groups of students may not see themselves as leaders with this traditional model?
I can go. I feel like traditional leadership, like the way I've like envisioned it, maybe the way it gets like portrayed in media is like whoever's like the loudest, most like reactionary and fast acting. And so I feel like as an introvert and as somebody who likes to like stop and think before things, I feel like people who are more like students who are more like introverted, who are more like slow and thoughtful can like get left out of those kind of like I don't want to say traditional, but like kind of like the way leadership has often been like portrayed.
So you're seeing in the traditional media, people favor the people that are more outspoken.
Yeah, more outspoken. I mean, like many examples, like often like men get seen in roles of like leadership, like just a few example, like watching shows like Lost or like The Walking Dead. It's like, oh no, there's a situation. Who's gonna take care of us? Obviously, the loudest man around. And it's just like I feel like a lot of the people who don't align with those identity, aka everybody else, or people who are more slow and thoughtful and guide with like emotion and intention, kind of like get forgotten in those traditional leader roles.
Nice. Thanks, Fi. What do other people think?
I find um it's definitely like a bit of a like it's characterized a lot by hierarchy. I think that's
Yep.
like an operative word. Both hierarchy in the sense of like one directional power, and exchange of ideas, kind of like from top to bottom. But then also thinking, like you touched on, Faye, um, around the hierarchies that exist that put certain people in leadership roles, whether it be race, class, gender, ability, those kind of social hierarchies as well. Um, yeah.
Thanks, Nico. Haley,
Yeah, I
you.
think very along the same lines of what the other folks have said. My daughter is 4, and so she watches a lot of Disney movies, and like right from childhood, it's I'm a damsel in distress. Please help me. I'm a woman. I'm a girl, and I don't know what to do until this big, strong white man comes. And so, again, that like I think it starts even lower of what this traditional leadership looks like, much of what you're writing. And I think those that get left out are those that might be who see themselves in a minority group, who might see themselves as not being physically strong, which is like that's not the case. I'm not trying to say that's right. I'm just saying that's who might not see themselves there. And I think anyone who might have a difference in learning or a difference in understanding, and those that really, yeah, like if you are not, and I think if you are not, maybe those who don't have a higher educational background might not see themselves as leaders and might see themselves as being left out. I was thinking as I was talking, so I apologize about that. But
No, no, that's great.
I'm
That's
on the same
perfect.
wavelength as everyone.
Perfect. Thanks, Haley.
Mhm.
Lydia, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm first going to share maybe my experience when I was trying to hire students through a leadership program here. And I really
Please.
focus on hiring just one student at a time. And I initially thought that, oh, like how does that fit into a leadership model? Because my view of that traditional leadership is leading groups, right? Like group work or taking kind of an active role in group work rather than having individual hires. And I really had to kind of reframe um, that into maybe not necessarily non-traditional leadership, but that basically reframe it for the students I hired as to how they develop leadership skills, even within individual work, right, or autonomous work. So that was something that reframe that I had to do when I started kind of hiring peer students through kind of leadership programs. So I just wanted to share that piece.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit about because it's so funny. I think we thought about this too, like quality over quantity interactions. So I think that's maybe somewhat what you're talking about with leading groups versus like the individual. But can you share as you kind of shifted that focus, like what the outcome of that was more? Because I think that is really interesting to talk about.
Yeah, so just to give a little bit more background, so I coordinate the writing center here at SAIT in Calgary, and I needed to hire support, and I focused on hiring one student at a time because I didn't have enough for like 2 or 3 or 4 students, so I couldn't kind of work with groups of students and um, get them kind of coordinating themselves or leading something. So when I hired that individual student to start off with, how I shifted the focus or how I kind of created leadership experiences was to well, number one, reframing it as leading other students. So basically they would this particular student would do drop-ins with and consult with other students seeking writing supports or presentation supports. So they needed those leadership skills. And then I also had them involved in developing programming. So they had to pitch me some ideas. We selected one together and they developed the entire thing on their own, which includes like a presentation boot camp. They took it from ideation to design to implementation to being part of evaluation. So that was also, even though it's quite autonomous, it was quite it still had elements of project management and elements of leadership, even though this student is not necessarily leading other groups that I've seen at SAIT. I've seen other leadership students do that. They're not quite doing that in my area.
Okay, I love this. So you'll see in the course of this workshop how I think that we've been able to center students, like you are talking about, at every level of the program from start to finish, past finish to assessment and redesign or whatever. So I love this. I think that is such a beautiful and really rewarding experience for students. Emily.
Thanks. Yeah, just jumping in on this prompt, I think one thing that stands out to me, in addition to echoing a lot of what's been shared, is the piece around traditional leadership, I think evoking a sense of having the answers, of like being the one who knows. Whereas I think who gets left out or like what's missing from that is kind of the pieces of like leaning into not knowing or figuring things out or problem solving or listening. Like I think there's a way that that can really block out. And like for all of us who ultimately don't have all the answers, we cannot necessarily see ourselves as leaders or as, sort of there can be that imposter syndrome that I think that can sort of lock folks into unnecessarily when we position a leader as the person who has all the answers.
Yeah, and I think like something that you mentioned, completely agree with imposter syndrome. And I think that starts at who is working at your university and who's running your programming. Because I think when we look at maybe more modern media and stuff like that, maybe we're seeing different leaderships. But then when you look at very old, very colonial institutions like universities and colleges across Canada, maybe you don't see that reflected in your everyday. So I think that that really matters and can really have an impact on students' view of themselves as leaders. Um, I think I'm ready to move to the next question if everybody else is, but I wanted to give a chance to the folks that have just joined us if they want to answer this question. What does traditional leadership mean to you? Who gets left out? What groups of students may not see themselves as leaders with this traditional model? Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add? Hannah.
Hi. Thanks for creating the forum and space to for us to answer these questions. It's really thought-provoking, actually.
Thank
What does
you.
traditional leadership mean to me? I think I thought a lot about this in working through my own training of student staff here at my institution. And it's very much the pack mentality. So you have a leader of the pack, and then everyone will follow. And I think I don't know if it's speaks to us as humans that we just need somebody to show either through social capitalism or through um, coercion or through just by the fact that they've been able to network better or through X, Y, and Z qualifications that they somehow we either assign them to that role of you are going to be the pack leader, you lead us the way, and then the followers have specific um, contributions, and it's all towards the pack leader's direction. But what if the pack leader takes us in a wrong direction or goes to a path that we don't want to go, we don't want to follow? And so, well, when we are, fall into the trap of groupthink, it's really hard to question because we've been conditioned to say, well, they're the leader. We told them they're the leader. They're supposed to guide us into, what we think is supposed to lead us to this prosperous land. So if we question that leadership, then we question our existence as followers. And I think that's such a psycho head trip that I feel like not a lot of people feel comfortable to challenge. But I think that's traditional leadership. But I think we're entering such an interesting phase post-COVID where the boundaries have shifted slightly. And it speaks to our keynote speaker was talking about yesterday about um, shifting the mindset of who gets a voice at the seat, who get at the table, and who ha can actually like impact change. And it can be such hyper localized that we can all be like leadership qualities or enact leadership skills within our own spaces that we don't really necessarily need a pack leader anymore. And that's a bit of a liberating thought. Yeah, and at least I found it when I was listening yesterday.
Thank you. I love that. Yes. Co-sign everything you're saying. We are going to talk today all about how we can enact leadership in our own spaces and how we can be in community. And that we all have leadership qualities, and maybe it takes, reflecting on the self, and how we relate to other things, to think about that. But it's true. I love that. We're going to talk about that a lot today. Okay, let's move to the next question just so we can keep moving along here. So I'm going to open up this next page. Um, what does leadership look like when it's rooted in care, community, and honoring lived experiences?
It didn't switch the whiteboard
Page.
for us.
You know what? let's let's reopen. I'm going to close and then reopen.
It looked like the viewer can navigate to the different pages, Tori. Like, so even though
Oh,
it's you're sharing it, it's not precisely what you're viewing.
okay,
The
love
folks have
this.
to, yeah.
It is the first time I am using whiteboards. Was this a good time to try it for the first time? Who's to say? Okay, there should be a little tab. It's like a little tab that has the pages. We're on page 2. We've just joined our second table. I've posed this hopefully thoughtful and powerful question to you. Does anybody want to hop in and answer this question? You can just unmute and jump in. Also, Aiden, thanks for the book rec. We'll check it out post workshop. Bye.
I could go, but maybe I have like a weird analogy. So, um, I like to go dancing, and recently I've been thinking, okay, what makes a good DJ and what makes a bad DJ? So, if you're the DJ, you've kind of been put in this role that you're in charge of this room, and I kind of find the difference is between like ego and responding to the crowd. So, I feel like if somebody's like a leader that's like, I know what the best dancer is, I know what the best playlist is, I got the best song, and you just play, people are not in it together. They're not part of it. But if you have a good DJ that's basically like responding to the crowd, like, you know, honoring the people that are there, honoring the people and the vibe that they're in, and playing things based on what's going on, everybody is having a better time. They feel like they're part of something, and like they feel heard. Like you can like, I'm just using like DJing and music because it's like you can visually see it and feel it, but it's like the same thing when you look at like, you know, politics or any kind of events. Like if you're actually like talking and feeling out the people that you are leading, everybody's going to be better for it. And if you're like, I know what I'm doing and I have the best ideas, it just does not feel good. So I feel like leadership, when it's like rooted in care community, is like, yeah, it's actually like productive and helpful and like a better feeling for anybody who's involved. So
Love it. Love that analogy. Lydia, you were going to jump in and then Haley next.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, well, the question makes me think that one of the ways it would show up is more collaboration, right? Rather than uh, kind of authoritative leadership. There's a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication going on, interaction, and that's how it would look like to me.
You never realize how bad your spelling is until you're spelling a word in front of other people. Okay, Haley, what do you think?
Yes, no problem. I love the analogy, and you really got my brain thinking as well. So I sort of really took the idea, like the word rooted for literal context, and I thought of like a flower or a tree, and the roots are, like it's almost like they're being fed and loved from the bottom, and so the decisions are working from the bottom to help raise up that flower or that tree. And then yes, when it's like root, when it's from the bottom, everyone has an opinion or everyone has a thought, everyone has a voice, everyone has the ability to feel as though they are being valued and heard. And when those all come together, that's when sort of the decisions can be one that people feel comfortable in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And that you really tapped on Nourish and Flourishes. That was the vibe for a flourishing flower, lots of green, and
Yep.
yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nico, what do you think?
Yeah, I feel like I'm just reflecting on the honoring lived experiences section of this question. And it put me in mind of the disability justice tenet, nothing about us without us, of honoring the fact that lived experience is not only um, deep expertise of the world around us, but it's knowledge, and it's valuable knowledge. And so I think spaces that treat lived experience with the respect and care that it deserves, are spaces that relationships can just really flourish, and trust can be really built. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah, completely. That's why we want to do extensive consultation. We want community members to feel like they have a voice, not just the people behind the scenes coordinating things and really relying on, without extracting labor, but relying on folks in our communities that have these lived experiences. Any other thoughts about Emily?
Yeah, I think another thing that pops up to me is like that piece around community, which can sometimes feel just like a buzzword or hard to pin down. But I think when I connect it to leadership, like it speaks to me to the importance of like people getting to be their whole selves and be living and breathing and sort of like more than just in our heads or more than just, written on a page, but like breathing more life into our interactions and so I feel like, yeah, sort of the messiness of that, the humanness of that. I think that it's sometimes still like using intangible words, but finding ways to, sort of foster more connection that feels whole and authentic.
And do you have any examples of things that, like, how do you know people are showing up as their whole selves?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think that sometimes it can be as simple as creating space for folks to get to know one another. Breaking bread together can be sometimes a really helpful kind of piece, but also like honoring and connecting to like what's going to make people feel comfortable listening and asking about that. And I think also like the co-creation kind of pieces of like giving more space for what how not always having a set parameter of what something the exact shape something's going to take, but kind of listening to and finding ways for that to be fed by um, groups or by multiple perspectives.
Nice. Any other thoughts? Okay. Okay, we're going to move to the third question. So if you want to click through your pages, you can join me on page 3. Um, what would a leadership program rooted in care, community, and honoring lived experiences look like on your campus? I know sometimes it can be hard to imagine when we maybe inherit programs from previous like predecessors, or things that have been built for many years. Haley.
Yes, sorry. You sort of sparked my idea when you said, when the programs that we inherit or the programs that have been around for years and we just do them because we've always done them that way. And that's not to say they're bad by any means, because they were hopefully rooted in, a foundation of learning and understanding. But I think sometimes it takes a different set of eyes. And so whether that is a different department, a different colleague, or a new person coming in because, positions change or people leave and they go different places. But I think it's maybe, a different framework or re-explaining it. And I think it's also about like learning through things like this, through conferences like this, or community or practices of what is working and what's going on at other institutions and how could that be connected to something you're doing here. So, I'd like to think our leadership programs are this, but I know that there's gaps missing. And then I think it's about being really critical about the programs that do exist or the programs that your area or that we as professionals support and taking a look at like who is missing from this program and what is missing from this program, and when we have those critical conversations and those critical eye, then we might be able to sort of go back to the beginning of what does rooted and what does leadership look like when it truly is embedded and rooted in community and care and honoring lived experiences. So I think it's sometimes us taking a step back and us being critical of the own work that we're doing, and being open to different ways of doing it or new suggestions. And I think obviously getting our students involved. We're the ones that we want them to be involved in our program. So how can they feel as though they want to be involved in our program?
Yeah. I love
That's a lot of
that. I
talk.
think, yeah, it's a tall order. Um, I think the other thing that I want to say also is like even I agree. Looking at other institutions, comparator schools, like I think is super helpful. But I think actually one of the things that was most helpful for us is looking at community organizations, like grassroots organization, community spaces, people working with youth in the community, like ended up, I feel like being a lot more fruitful and aligned with our values than a lot of uh universities and campus kind of models or structures. So you'll probably see that throughout when we look at Nourish and Flourish. Maybe we'll take like one more before we move on. 5.
Yeah, I have a thing. I think it might touch to the last question as well, but I just feel like it's like basically like making the gap smaller between the leader and the people that they're leading. And so like
Love
sitting
that.
at the same level as them is what it could look like, just to make it like, yeah, like bringing whoever's like, if you're hiring like student leaders and they're leading other students, but like making it feel like more peer to peer, more like consultative. And then the students who are then, coming in and seeing a student leader, like there's less of a gap between them being like, oh, maybe I can become a leader. Maybe this is what it actually looks like because this leader's actually talking to me, listening to me, honoring my experience and coming in with care. And then it just like builds like confidence from below and kind of like bridges that gap of what leadership actually looks like and kind of like creates a new generation of like what leadership can look like that'll help them in any community, basically.
I love that. Yeah, it definitely takes time. And I think that one of the main things that you're kind of touching on, not only flattening hierarchies, but like if you say you're going to do something, like following through and like building that trust with students, I think is really important. Um, nice. I'm gonna let's take a peek at all these boards and just see, is there any threads that I think like the biggest thread it seems like is listening to students. What do students want? How can we shift folks' perspective to show that they are leaders? Collaboration, increasing interaction, like quality interactions with people, doing things as groups, as community, nothing in a silo. And a lot of talk about hierarchies or one directional ways of learning. So how can we facilitate conversations where everyone's experiences are valued as equally important? Okay, I love this. I'm going to close this whiteboard. I'm going to upload it to the Google Drive. So if you want to access it after this workshop, you'll be able to do that. And then we're going to get into talking about Nourish and Flourish as a whole. Okay. Okay, everyone can see my screen. Okay.
Thank you
We
might
can
be on, like, we can see both sides. What's
we
coming
can
up.
see your like speaking notes.
Love. Okay, let's try that again.
Just don't want spoilers, you know.
You don't want spoilers. Okay, hold on. I think I know what I need to do. Okay. Okay, that should be correct. So, as we chatted about, kind of the philosophy behind Nourish and Flourish is that everybody has leadership within them, like we've been chatting about. But because of different experiences, identities, upbringing, culture, etc., it might show up in different ways. And a lot of the traditional models that we've been kind of talking about, or maybe work within, kind of creates a homogenous group. But thinking about leadership in an intersectional way, in a relational way that's shaped by where we come from is really important, and how we show up in community. And like Fi mentioned at the end there, like true leadership really includes sharing of power and listening deeply, and advocating for equity. And this can really happen, like we've chatted about. It's like you knew what I was going to talk about. But when students are feeling seen and heard, and that they're trusting, because you've put in the work and you've followed through on things that you are promising. Relationship building is at the forefront of this, because it's relational, and community-based leadership is based in collective care, not individualism, which is something we also talked about in traditional programs or portrayals in media. So this means showing up for one another and, practicing vulnerability. It's something at Nourish and Flourish that you get to practice intentionally every few weeks, and stuff like that can really, allow for this depth in relationship building that maybe you don't see in other programs. Creates compassionate leaders, which is, the thing that we need most, I feel like, in this world, and connections between people. And connections between people mean that they're building resilience within themselves and as a community. So how do we do all of these things? How do we create a program that's based in community-based leadership program? You talk to students, you talk to a lot of students. So I started a consultation process in 2022 with my colleagues. We tried to make it as student-centered as possible. So that means including them from the beginning. A lot of programs say they're student-centered, but then they're only coming in halfway, like you already have some ideas in mind. So we started from a truly blank whiteboard and got students involved at the beginning. So it was also, the consultation process was also led by students, which was really cool. So they were asking the questions, they were writing the questions, they were gathering all the details, they were inputting it, they were looking at the data. So that was really fun to watch. So a few of the key findings from our consultation process is that people wanted to have a space where they could come together and share their lived experiences, pieces of their identity and self-knowledge. And then really people wanted storytelling and spaces to build authentic connections. I think this makes a lot of sense because this was post-pandemic, as well as at higher educational institutions. A lot of classes you're like void of, especially like in psych when you're running an experiment, like you're supposed to be, or at least I was taught that you're not supposed to be seen in any of your experiments. And so in places like this where you really get to show up as your true self and realize that that impacts all of the things that we do, I think is really empowering and different. Different forms of learning, engagement opportunities. People wanted joy, fun, laughter, low barrier access to the program, which looks like no extensive hiring processes, a flexible time commitment. So those were two really important things for us. So a lot of our student leadership programs that were offered at UVic had extensive hiring processes and were really, really competitive. There were 100 people that wanted 10 spots. And that really impedes students that have that imposter syndrome or don't see themselves reflected in traditional programs. They might think, well, I'm not wanted in these programs. And then the flexible time commitment, this is an equity piece. Not every student has time to volunteer or attend extracurricular activities. And their schedules can change as their circumstances changed. So all of the programs that were offered at the time had a fixed cohort of students starting the program in September and ending in April. And we wanted something that you could kind of come and go as you see fit, and you are still just as part of the community as the people that come every week. Food was mentioned a lot because we work in student affairs, but it is a bridge for people to make connections. It's at the most important kind of family events, celebrations, gatherings, holidays, etc. So it makes a lot of sense of why people would want to see food. It's a comforting thing. And we take it seriously at Nourish Flourish. So like I mentioned before, making it as accessible as possible, and food, a lot of food. People like something to do. So they can look down, so they can comment on it. It's parallel play for adults, and I think it's something that really, really helps our introverted students. This is a little peek of some of our dinner programs. So the top picture here is a dinner program. Same with the bottom right, and then the bottom left and middle are pictures of our microgrant program, which I'll talk about in a second. Our program is a bi-weekly dinner. of 25 to 40 students, and each have a unique theme related to student life. And we use the World Cafe method. So we launched in January 2023. So this program has been running for almost 3 years. And one of the key parts of this was finding a type of facilitation method that would really work with the type of program we wanted to see. I'll probably use like student, participant, and community member pretty interchangeably, but I'm talking about all of the students that attend Nourish and Flourish. The program is small intentionally. It is trying to get more quality over quantity interactions because a lot of the other programs at our school offer programs for hundreds of people, and you might not get really intentional interactions. World Cafe method, it's a very, very common facilitation method. Probably people have heard of it here, but if you haven't, it's a structured conversational process designed to facilitate open and intimate discussions, encouraging participants to share ideas by engaging in multiple rounds of conversation. So it's built on a few assumptions that we also would like to emulate in Nourish and Flourish, which is that people already have the wisdom/creativity within them to confront the most difficult challenges. The answers we need are available to us, and we are wiser together than we are alone. Does anyone have any questions about the program structure, World Cafe, or any of the student consultation process?
Tori, can I just ask one question? Is it the same group of students every bi-week, or is it new groups of students?
That's a great point, or great question. It is a mix. So we have spaces for about 70% of our dinners to be returning folks and 30% to be new folks. So every dinner will be a different group of people, 2/3 returning and 1/3 that are brand new.
That's
So you're always sitting at the dinner table with different people, but you will get to know and have familiar faces and friends because people are repeat customers.
I love that. I love the idea of an actual meal. Like we do a lot of snacky type food, but a meal, you're right, there's so much there. It's like sitting with your family, right? And so that's very cool. I'm excited to
Yeah,
learn more. Thank you.
yeah, that's actually what I wanted to talk about next. But so that's a great segue. But does anyone have any other questions or comments about the consultation process or the structure of Nourish and Flourish? Okay. If you do, you can raise your hand, put it in the chat, and I'll answer it. Okay, let's look more in depth at World Cafe. So, as I mentioned before, a lot of their ethos is something that we wanted to emulate in our program. They run off of 7 design principles. So I'm going to read them out and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how they play out IRL. So the first one is clarify the context. So define the purpose of the cafe. What is the central question or theme that will guide the discussion? We clearly outline that in our registration process. So we talk about, like I mentioned, topics that relate to students. So those could be any themes from this semester. We did our relationship to personal values, we did our relationship to conflict, and we did our relationship to style. So each dinner has a different theme. People will know what the theme is and see some example questions before they register. So if they feel nervous about answering any of these questions or talking to other people, they can practice a little bit at home if they see the questions, so they can have some time to reflect, but also some time to maybe build up some of that confidence to talk to people about intimate themes and topics. Creating a hospitable place. So, like Haley mentioned, a lot of student affairs or uni programs center around pizza and pop and chips, and that is great. Sometimes we are working on shoestring budgets. I totally have been there. But trying to arrange a welcoming and comfortable environment that encourages openness and dialogue was really, really important to us. So we set the table. We host in a restaurant on campus that does our catering, and we set the table with tablecloths and flowers and candles, and really try to make the ambiance like a nice space to be in, and that students will come in and feel like they are taken care of and people have thought about them. The next design principle is explore questions that matter. So crafting questions that are thought-provoking and relevant to the participants' interests and the session's goals. We'll talk a bit about that. Encouraging everyone's contribution, fostering an atmosphere where every voice is valued and participants are either encouraged to contribute their perspectives or actively listen. So we do a community agreement at the beginning, and we talk a lot about what active listening looks like. Connecting diverse perspectives, so facilitating the sharing of insights across groups to weave in a rich tapestry of understanding. We do that with help of student staff, as well as working on promotion and word of mouth to make sure that our participants are from a diverse population. And then listening together for patterns and insights. So that's collective reflection, looking at themes, insights, deeper questions, and we do that through graphic recording on the table. So we can share these aha moments with each other, kind of summarize it, and see if there's any action steps that we want to follow through on. So what this looks like kind of actually at a dinner is we, like I mentioned before, set the table, create a special and accessible environment for participants. It was important to us to also nourish students with food that maybe they're not accessing in their day-to-day lives. We do a lot of welcome and introductions. We have our community agreement. We introduce ourselves. At each table will introduce themselves to each other, which builds trust and allows people to show up as their whole selves. We do a lot of scaffolding of questions so people can feel welcomed to share. And then we launch into our small group of rounds / questions. So this is what we did earlier today, 3 rounds of 20 minutes of conversations that are at each table. We do the graphic recording on the table, as well as we have student staff that help us witness the conversation, address any harm or microaggressions or anything that has come up that is stuck with people, or provide resources or support to students who are having a difficult time. And then at the end, we do a harvest. So participants are invited to share their insights with all of the tables, all of the groups, and then I send that out to folks at the end of the evening as well. People really enjoy sharing about themselves and their experiences, and it's nice to really center that. I think that this program really encourages everyone's participation, not just extroverts. And I think that connecting those big ideas to show that there is either similarities or differences at each table is really interesting too. I think this program in its essence is simple, which I do think that is something that I like too, is keeping some of the solutions to difficult problems simple. But with the context and the low numbers of participants, with the question crafting and the purpose of this program, it does make it complex. But I do think when you look at it, I do think it seems simple. None of these things seem super radical, but for some reason it does feel like that at an institution. Does anyone have any questions about the World Cafe method and how we use it in our program? Okay. If anything sparks an idea or a question, feel free to just raise your hand or pop it in the chat. So, like I mentioned before, we've covered many different themes over the course of 3 years. These are some of the ones that we've explored. There's a handout in the Google Drive that shares all of these themes. If there's one that you want to chat about in more detail, you can email me. I have my email at the end, as well as you can look at the handout and the slides on the Google Drive. We've had different activities connected to the themes because some of them are like more tactile experiences. So we've done mindfulness exercises, we've done bannock making workshops, we've done poetry readings and musical performances. We've had student art galleries. So I think students also kind of like the routine of the dinner, but because to experience and talk about your relationship to something like creativity and art, it's really nice to have kind of some additional activities to really experience that in the moment. So yeah, students performing poetry or music has been something that they can also offer the community, and something that just really adds to some of the dinners when we're talking about things that are real life experiences. It adds a little bit of texture to the program. Haley.
I apologize if you're going to get to this and if I'm jumping ahead, but can you remind
No.
me how long each dinner is set for, and then what you do with the insights and ideas that students generate while they're connecting and talking?
Yeah, that's a great question. The program runs from 4:30 to 7:30 bi-weekly. We open the doors at 4 so people can hopefully get situated before the dinner starts at 4:30 because it is a pretty scheduled and it is a fully facilitated event. Yeah, so I think that the 3 hours was something we changed. Last year we ran them for 2.5. We felt like 3 made it a little bit more comfortable. It's bi-weekly. I still think 3 hours can be a big ask for students. So I appreciate their time. But yeah, 2.5 was just like a little too short. And then I'll talk a little bit about how we connect with students outside of the dinner program as well in a minute. Are there any other questions?
Tori, I have a quick question,
Yes.
and forgive me if you might have mentioned this earlier and I might have missed it. So because the events or dinners are bi-weekly, do you have the same group of students that attend bi-weekly, or does it rotate, or do you switch students out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the whole program is an opt-in program. You can technically attend every dinner with us, or you can come to one. At the end, when we collect all of the ideas and people reflect on their experiences of that night, we talk about how their conversations and their reflection about their relationship to, for example, conflict, that was our last event, can be incorporated into their leadership practice. This is something that's going to be new this year, but at the end of the semester, we're going to do a more lengthy self-reflection about how we incorporate the conversations that we've had and the things that we've learned into our leadership practice. So the people that come, it's about 2/3 of people that are returning and about 1/3 that are new. The new folks, we want fresh ideas, new people to be able to experience Nourish and Flourish. But then we also do want a core group of people to be able to build on the trust and, community that we're building. So there isn't a structured cohort that starts at one certain time and ends at another time. You can join us when you can. So sometimes students go on co-op or they get a job or whatever leads them in another direction and they're not able to participate in a semester, and hopefully they'll join when they can. So it's a little bit of new folks and returning folks, but one of the things that we really wanted to honor from our student consultation was allowing folks to be able to participate in a way that they can. It can be really limiting to a lot of students to have like a cohort model. I do also think that those work for a lot of student leadership programs. This seemed to fill a need on our campus, but I understand that it maybe isn't for everybody or every program. Does that answer your question, Lydia? Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Building and safety, super important. We work with a team of 11 student life mentors, and they help facilitate the group discussion at each table. So there's one sitting at each table. There's 8 tables, one SLM per table. They have I always call it like participant plus rule. This is really important. So they're peers, which is important that this is a peer-based program. But B, the thing to flatten the hierarchy that we thought of was to have them participate as they would a participant, but maybe have some more skills and training on facilitating conversation, witnessing things. So first and foremost, they do all of the activities that participants would do, but they're taught to keep things on track, making sure everyone's sharing, addressing any sticky situations that come up, and resource sharing if they need to. They don't wear uniforms. They wear name tags, and we do identify them at the beginning of the event. But that was another thing that we thought was important to, again, try to flatten that hierarchy. They're there to welcome students into the space. They do all the setup and takedown. And we've done extensive training on how to have meaningful conversations with these folks and how to use the World Cafe method. So that is one way that we build in safety. The other ways that we build in safety is before, during, and after the events for participants. So we share a pre-event resource toolkit that includes our community agreement, like we talked about at the beginning of today's workshop, ways to be like a bystander or address microaggressions, and example questions so you can fully be prepared to attend Nourish and Flourish. During, we do the community agreement. We offer a low sensory room for folks to access during the event. We have an anonymous comment box. We have the student life mentors. And we really encourage any type of anecdotal feedback, and people feel comfortable giving that. Um, and then after the event, they get an email with a list of resources that's also on their program at the event. This gives them a connection point to the coordinators, including me, if they have any questions or need any support. We share all of the harvest stage of World Cafe Method. All of the ideas that were shared, that were recorded, get sent out, like scanned and sent out to them. And then at the event, we do a post-event like Likert scale. People put stickers on different statements, whether they agree or disagree. We do quarterly surveys. And then, of course, if any harm comes up, if that's something said in the comment box or an email sent out or something that happened at an event, we will try to address the harm in an appropriate way that's supportive to the people that are impacted. Haley.
Sorry, apologies. I have another question if that's okay.
No, I love it.
So the pre-event resource tool, does that include, or do participants know the topic before they arrive? And is that included in the toolkit, or am I misunderstanding that toolkit?
Yeah, it gets sent out with registration. So
Okay.
during the registration, they'll know the topic and they'll get some example questions.
Oh, cool. Okay, cool.
So they'll know what the topic is and what they are going to be discussing. So they have a chance, if they're nervous, to think about it beforehand and kind of formulate an answer that maybe they'll use at the dinner. And then also if the topic maybe isn't something that they feel comfortable addressing or talking about, maybe they opt out of that one if it doesn't feel safe for them. So yeah, they get advance notice of all of the topics and can decide for them which is best. All of the students suggest topics. So all the themes that we've chosen over the past 3 years, except for, of course, the first couple events, were submitted by students. So that's really fun that they are suggesting topics, choosing them, and then discussing them. So yeah, really important to address any harm. If anything comes up at the community, it's really important that we are role modeling what we do, how we show up. And like I mentioned before, it really builds trust for folks in the community. And we would encourage that happens on a peer level as well. The last thing that I wanted to chat about is our other components. So the dinner is a structured, facilitated event that happens bi-weekly. But we found after the first year that we also wanted to add in a informal space for students to connect with each other, with us, the professional staff, as well as the student life mentors. So we host a weekly drop-in space called Coffee Catch-Ups. And we host that in our Student Life Hub, which is a programming space in our office. That it's drop-in, snacks, coloring, activities, puzzles, games. So if people want to maybe join the Nourish and Flourish community, but they feel hesitant to come to a dinner, they can come to this more low-level, accessible weekly coffee. They can introduce their friends if their friends want to check it out in a way that they're not committing to the full 3 hours. And it's a way for people to, again, like relationships are built on small interactions with each other. So this gives people an opportunity to build those relationships. So when they're at the dinners, they're having vulnerable and supportive conversations because they know each other, which is really, really nice. So it's a good entry point for students that might be nervous about attending the full dinner. Let's take a peek at the chat. Kelly asks, does that help increase access? You mentioned 10 spaces for, yeah, yes. Okay, Kelly, thank you. That's another really good point. So because the dinner programs have a small capacity, 25 to 40 students, this also allows people, because there's no limit to who can come to Coffee Ketchup, it does also increase access. That is, yes, exactly. So ideally, everyone who signs up can come to dinner, but if that's not the case, they can catch us weekly at Coffee Ketchups. Yeah, there's risk in sharing, there's risk in group discussion, and there can be risk to joining communities. So having something like Coffee Ketchups, where it's very low risk, we don't necessarily always talk about some of these deeper topics, like our relationship to ourselves. It just allows people to build that trust and confidence to come to the dinner programs. Yeah, and when you're in a context and a familiar place with familiar faces, it really helps with the sharing. And then we also offer microgrants. So this is something that I wanted to add in where students could demonstrate what they've learned at Nourish and Flourish. So folks that have attended 2 of our dinner programs can apply for a microgrant. It's up to $350. 150 of those dollars get to go to the student for their labor. It was really important for me to pay them for their labor. That was a values thing of Nourish and Flourish, but I also know that values don't always equate to what you want to do, like, or can do with your budget. So that is something that yeah, was really valuable to me and really something that I wanted to do. But I also completely understand if that is not the case for many programs. So yeah, part of the microgrant is paying them for hosting their program. And then the rest of the money goes to food and any supplies for activities that they want to run. They host it at their house, at our Student Life Hub, somewhere on campus. And they host like one small table of a larger Nourish and Flourish event. So they submit an application, and then we've been able to fund everybody's application. So they'll receive a coaching session. We'll talk about event planning, accessibility, how they want to incorporate what they've learned at the dinners into their program. We talk about group facilitation, inclusivity, creating welcoming environments. And then they do a summary at the end. It can be in a format of a video, a written assignment, or a presentation. So we really wanted to allow students to participate again in a way that feels supportive to them. So many classes require so much writing. So we thought a video might be fun, or maybe like a presentation. It kind of ends up more being like a discussion. But that way they can talk to us about what they did, and share their accomplishments with us, and talk about how it was meaningful for them, and give them a chance to reflect on the leadership skills that they've developed, and for someone to like witness that in them. We try to make it low barrier, the application simple, the time commitment simple, so folks can apply. We also, like, that is also a really good skill to learn, is applying for a grant. So I think when we are in our coaching session, we give feedback on things that on their application that they could improve. And I think that applying for a microgrant in a safe community with folks that they know is a really good first step to maybe applying for a grant later on in their educational pursuits. So it works really well with our program as something that they can demonstrate their leadership skills by. They can do something that's sometimes required of them in their education. They can get practice with that. And then, like Kelly mentioned before, it also increases the access because then, like, we funded 4 microgrants this semester. So that's 4 additional programs with approximately 30 additional students in our program. And then hopefully they attend their friend's program or their classmates program, and then they want to join the Nourish and Flourish community. Any questions about coffee ketchups or a microgrant process? We have about 8 minutes left, and that kind of concludes today's workshop. So does anyone, if there's no questions about coffee ketchups or microgrants, does anyone have any questions or anything that they want to touch on about Nourish and Flourish as a whole?
I had another question, if that's okay, Tori.
Of course.
So I'm curious with the Nourish and Flourish, and you mentioned the biweekly dinners. Okay, so how did you secure funding for this program? Because I figured dinners are not inexpensive. So how did you go about that? Did you pitch it to your managers? I'm just curious about how they came to be.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think so I don't know if this was mentioned before, but this was a workshop that I presented on caucus, like at caucus in June. And we talked extensively about food on campuses because a lot of them have strict guidelines with who they can work with. Oftentimes there's, food services, a catering company on campus, which can kind of limit them to food. This is another like kind of kismet thing about Nourish and Flourish. The first year we actually got local caterers to cater each meal. It is a big lift. Like it is expensive. I think it like turned out to be about like $25 per head, which can be a lot for programs. We worked with and we found that what works best, I think, for our office is working with our student societies. So I host Nourish and Flourish at our graduate student societies restaurant. So it is lower cost and avoids us having to work with our institutions like catering company and food services, which can be really expensive. So those are things that kind of were kismet that kind of fell into our lap and made this program possible. But I understand that it can be like expensive. So the program is base funded. It's a program that is had been around for about 7 years before I inherited it. Before I started working on Nourish and Flourish, it looked like a very traditional leadership program. So there was 3 streams, a mental health stream, a consent education stream, and a stream for queer and trans students. And it worked very similarly to traditional leadership programs where there was an expert that would come in. They would teach students on a specific skill that they were experts on. And then the students were to bring those to the community. And I definitely think that there's times and places for that type of model. But we found that students wanted things that were a little bit more peer-centered and valued different types of leadership because the program that was coordinated before, the coordinator would choose the expert. And obviously, people value different things based on their identity, their culture, their upbringing, etc. And that just didn't seem to, yeah, work for our students. We wanted to tap into their collective wisdom, their ways of knowing and being. And like I mentioned with World Cafe, it's acknowledging that we have the skills or the knowledge to solve problems that we face, but maybe it's talking about it and being in community that helps us realize that. So those were some of the things that was happening before. And then when I inherited it, with Emily, who's here, as well as a previous colleague, we started, and when we started the consultation process, that's kind of where we started, kind of from the ground up. Having worked at other institutions, I know that the food pieces can be tricky and not always possible, but that is something that we've done, is really built relationships with the student societies on our campuses to allow for like access to their spaces and collaborating with them on programs. Emily, do you have something that you wanted to add?
Thought I would just jump in really quickly to add. I think it's important to acknowledge as well. I mean, having seen Tori really manage the budget of this program for the last almost 3 years, despite it having a decent, sort of base funded budget. Tori works with $17,000 a year to run this programming, so it is not like an insurmountable amount, I think, to look at securing as far as the actual program expenses. As an office within UVic's Office of Student Life, we've also looked more holistically across our programming we have disestablished full-time staff roles in order to elevate and pay students for their work, their contributions, their involvement in our programming. And so that's extended, but even there too, we're looking at about $30,000 to pay the students at all the levels that are involved in the programming that Tori's described. So when you think about that and sort of the ways that you can make some small but really significant changes to where money gets spent, there's a lot that can be possible. I thought I'd throw some of those tangible numbers out there just to give like kind of the concrete sense of how this program's working.
I appreciate that, because I always think from working in other programs that I'm flush with cash, but maybe that's just not the case. I'm not sure. But yeah, Emily's right. Looking also paying like experts to come in traditional leadership roles. Like we were paying speakers, $25K to come and speak to students. So we really shifted that and used that to pay our students and to create welcoming and delicious meals every 2 weeks. Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate that. That's all for me. Does anybody have any other questions or comments that they would like to share? This is my contact information. You can also check out our website for Nourish and Flourish. And I tried to use we as much as possible, but this program obviously doesn't happen in a vacuum. I do a lot of the coordination, but it's really thanks to a lot of folks in our office. I'll list them out here so they get their proper due, but Priyanka, Emily W, Nico, Fai, Fatima, Louisa, Kaylin, Doug, Kathy, the grad house team, which is our student society, and our group of student life mentors, and of course the community itself, really make this program possible. So I just wanted to mention that too. I do some of the back end stuff, but a lot of it is truly built by those folks as well. So thank you so much. That's all my time. If you have any questions or comments, or would like to look at any of the resources that I shared, like the community agreement, the pre-event resource toolkit, any of the themes in further detail, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to share any of the resources. I will not gatekeep any of those things. So just shoot me an email and I would be happy to share. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope to be in touch.
Yes, thank you so much, Tori and team. That was beautiful. I was writing furiously as you're talking, and I really think like your program is so holistic and beautiful in every sense. And I really appreciated how you took us through sort of the process of Nourish to Flourish at the very beginning when we did the World Cafe. So we got to experience what students do, and I think that really speaks to the program and the volume that you can reach and the conversations that you can have. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for representing here as well as at caucus. And thank you everyone else for attending. I hope that you got as much out of it as I did, because like I said, I know I was writing. Tori, again, thank you for sharing your information, and I'm sure I will be following up with you. And again, thank you for everyone for attending. There is another session occurring at there's two other sessions, excuse me, occurring at 1:45 for those of you that are interested in wanting to pop into other spaces. Those links have been provided in an email as well as the PDFs. And I hope, Ruth, and I hope to see you sort of around for the rest of the day as well as into tomorrow as well. So thank you, Tori. Thank you, team. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Beautiful virtual round of applause. And thank you for sharing your time and knowledge with us today.
Thanks, Haley.